This man right here is New York Jets head coach Herm Edwards. You might know him for a lot of different reasons. You might remember him as the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs that guided them to the playoffs in 2006 in one of the most improbable final weeks of a season, where 4 things had to happen for them to make it, and by God, all 4 of them did. You might remember him as the head coach of Arizona State when he had more recruiting violations than wins, and sent that program into the gutter and their darkest moment ever, which they somehow climbed out of in record time, thanks to Kenny Dillingham being really good at his job. However, if you know Herm Edwards for one thing, and for one thing only, you know him for his time with the Jets when he famously said this quote in a press conference.
"You play to win the game."
You play to win the game. And in theory, that's a really good concept. It's obvious, but it's good. Everything you do should be to advance your chances of winning. You're not trying to lose, you're trying to win. If what you're doing in life or on game day is not helping you win at this very moment, then you're doing it wrong. However, there is a caveat to that. Yes, good coaches try to win the game and do everything in their power to do it. But good coaches also know when to wave the white flag. If you're not trying to win the game when you're down by 7 points with 2 minutes left, you're really bad at your job. Having said that, if you're trying to win the game with 4 minutes left when you're down by 45 points, that's just as bad. There is no reason to risk injury if the game is over, especially at the most important position on the field, and especially if that player had a pretty lengthy injury history already. Sometimes, you just have to know when to throw in the towel, admit that it's not your day, and move on to the next week. And Herm Edwards did that during this game right here. On November 13th, 2005, the New York Jets took on the Carolina Panthers. And to say that the Jets got smoked would be putting it lightly. It's funny, because it was only a 10-3 game at the end of 3 quarters. But by the time the 4th quarter rolled around, the floodgates opened up, as the Panthers scored 20 points in an 8-minute stretch to extend a 10-3 game into a 30-3 game. With 5 minutes left, and the Jets trailing by 27 points, or 4 possessions, they knew that the game was over, and Edwards decided to call off the Hounds and do nothing but run the ball. On New York's final drive, the Jets called 9 plays, and 8 of them were runs specifically designed to chew the clock. Edwards isn't dumb. He knew that nothing good could happen by throwing the ball, increasing the chances that his quarterback could take a shot, especially when they already lost Chad Pennington and Jay Fiedler, their top 2 guys, to injury earlier in the season. And he just wanted to get out of this game relatively unscathed in everything but the loss column. You're not erasing a 27-point deficit in 5 minutes, so just lay off and live to see another day. Don't compound the damage and make a bad situation worse than it has to be. Much like it's not a good idea to try fleeing from an officer after getting pulled over, it's not a good idea to try and make a bad situation worse by playing aggressively in a spot that you cannot win in. You know who didn't take that advice? That's right, Herm freaking Edwards himself. Because 1 week later, I kid you not, 1 week later, the Jets played the Broncos, and Edwards decided to do a complete 180. In an identical situation, Edwards decided to switch up his entire philosophy and play aggressively in an impossible-to-win spot. And to say that it backfired on him would be putting it lightly. Because if you want an example in the countless of examples out there of why the 2005 season for the Jets, 1 year after making it to the AFC divisional round and taking the 15-1 Pittsburgh Steelers to overtime, was a complete disaster and one of the worst seasons in franchise history, here you go. Because 2 decades later, this strategy by Herm Edwards deserves a deep dive for being, quite possibly, one of the dumbest moves of his entire coaching career. And this is the story behind the infamous Jets-Broncos matchup from 2005 and how Herm Edwards bungled the Bronco game. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping up the video, and for joining this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about Herm Edwards and his mile-high mistake. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and just how stupid Herm Edwards was during it, we need some context to understand the importance of the game at hand, as well as how the game itself was going. It's November 20th, 2005. It's week 11 of the NFL season, and we head to Denver for this AFC matchup between the New York Jets and the Denver Broncos. A few seasons prior, in 1998, these two teams met here in the AFC Championship for the right to advance to Super Bowl 33. This matchup right here did not have the same implications by any means, as while one of these teams was really freaking good, another one was really freaking bad. On the plus side, the Broncos enter this one at 7-2, 2 games up on first place in the AFC West, and in a dogfight for that number 2 seed and a bye in the first round of the playoffs. Thanks to a top 3 offense in the conference and the second best point differential in the conference, the Broncos enter this game as one of the best teams in football, and were riding high, having won 7 of their last 8 games, including all 5 games played this season at home. It was almost impossible to beat the Broncos in Denver. On the minus side, the Jets enter this game as one of the worst teams in football, entering with an abysmal 2-7 record, sitting dead last in the AFC East, sitting ugly with the second worst record in the league, and looking completely incompetent. Injuries derail this team early on, especially at the quarterback position. And when you combine that with Curtis Martin looking old and injured in what turned out to be his final season, it's no surprise that the Jets entered this game with the second worst offense in football, having scored just 121 points, or roughly 13 points per game, across their first 9 games. For the record, the only team worse than them was the Baltimore Ravens. The Jets had lost 4 straight games, had scored single digits more times than 18 or more points, and had nothing to play for at this point outside of pride. This was going to be a long slog toward the end of the season, and everyone in New York who rooted for the Jets was just counting the days until the 2005 season mercifully came to an end. And as you could tell from the highlights of the game you've been watching this entire time, this game was more of the same for the Broncos in a good way, and more of the same for the Jets in a bad way. No one really gave the Jets much of a chance at winning this one. The Broncos entered as 13-point favorites on their home field. Sometimes Vegas gets it wrong, and sometimes the general public gets it wrong. This was not one of those times. Everyone knew that Denver would blow the Jets out, and sure enough, this game was complete and utter domination on the part of the Broncos, as with 2 minutes left, Denver was on cruise control, leading it 27-0. When Denver scored their final touchdown of the game, they had amassed 406 yards of total offense compared to just 147 for the Jets, nearly tripling them in that department. They had amassed 28 first downs compared to just 9 for the Jets, more than tripling them in that department. And you're not going to lose too many games when you dominate the time of possession battle, as the Broncos finished the game with over 42 minutes of possession, controlling the ball for over 70% of the contest, thanks to converting half of their third downs, converting twice on fourth down, and forcing 5 turnovers, winning the turnover margin by 4. The Jets couldn't do anything right on this day. There were a lot of bad games for the Jets in 2005, but this one had to be the worst. They couldn't run the ball, amassing just 19 yards on 8 carries. They couldn't stop the run, with Bronco running back Mike Anderson getting a hat trick with 3 rushing touchdowns. The Broncos started off strong with 17 points on their first 3 drives, including a 95-yard drive to kick the game off, and they never looked back. But the worst part of this game for the Jets wasn't the fact that they were trailing 27-0. Nor was it the fact that they looked inept on both sides of the ball, nor was it the fact that they still had 6 more games to go in the season, including 2 games in prime time where the whole country would see firsthand how bad they were. It was the fact that their starting quarterback, third-year man Brooks Bollinger, got injured and was knocked out of the game on this play right here in the first quarter with a concussion. Bollinger was by no means a good quarterback. The previous week against Carolina, in that aforementioned 30-3 loss, Bollinger threw for 98 yards, no touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, and posted a passer rating of 25.6, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. I'm actually kind of surprised the passer rating was as high as 25. However, he was all the Jets had left at this point after Chad Pennington and Jay Fiedler got knocked out in the same week against the Jacksonville Jaguars back in September in Week 3. And with Bollinger out, the next man up for the Jets was a familiar face, and a man who they literally signed off the couch after that game against the Jaguars back in September. That man was this man right here, Vinny Testaverde, the former first overall pick by the Buccaneers all the way back in 1987, who is now 42 years old and nearing the end of his NFL career, now well past his prime. Testaverde was, understandably, not that good by this point. In 2004, he led the NFL in interceptions when he threw 20 with the Dallas Cowboys. And by the time this game was done, his stats on the season were a man who threw no touchdowns and 6 interceptions. By the end of Week 11, there were a whopping 49 players who had thrown a touchdown pass. Somehow, Vinny Testaverde, despite throwing close to 100 passes on the season, was not one of them. That's how bad he was. And that's how bad this Jets offense was in 2005. And during this game, unsurprisingly, Testaverde stunk as he threw no touchdowns and 2 interceptions while posting a passer rating of 44.1, which for some perspective, the average passer rating in 2005 was somewhere around 80. So he was nowhere close to putting up any sort of quality start by any means. However, Testaverde was also not the healthiest man by this point. He was 42 years old and was recovering from an Achilles injury. So while Testaverde stunk, he wasn't playing at 100%. With that in mind, it's now 27-0 with under 2 minutes left. This man right here, Vinny Testaverde, is nursing an Achilles injury. You've lost 3 quarterbacks already, including Brooks Bollinger earlier in the day. The game is 100% over. You thought it was over last week down by 27 points with 5.5 minutes left. So by that logic, with under 2 minutes left down by the same deficit, deep in your own territory, it's definitely over. It's so over that by this point, Bronco fans, with their team winning the game, have left the stadium to beat traffic. The only way you can win at this point, and obviously it's not happening, but the only way you could win is with a touchdown, an onside kick, another touchdown, another onside kick, a third touchdown, another onside kick, and another touchdown. It's just not happening. You're not winning the game. And obviously, Testaverde doesn't need the reps. This isn't like you're giving a youngster a chance to operate the offense in a live situation and give him some reps in an actual game situation. Testaverde is very familiar with the offense and is very familiar with the speed of the game, and has thrown about 6,600 passes in game situations before. Conventional wisdom here says that you just run the ball. Get out of there unscathed. You already lost one quarterback. There's no sense in pushing the ball down the field to risk losing another one, especially one who is old and is already banged up. So naturally, Herm Edwards, in all his genius, decided to completely contradict his logic from 1 week prior against Carolina and decided to do this.
I don't think anybody here is a starter next year.
Testaverde will throw into 5 in the secondary, or will he? Down he goes. Marco Coleman was right there. They call it a sack on that 2nd and 15, and Vinny is holding on to his leg. Remember, he had an Achilles and calf strain before. He collapsed pretty quickly on that one. Yep, without really even being touched, he goes down. We have an injury timeout with 1:11 to play.
Wow, I'm shocked, I tell you. Absolutely shocked. Who could have possibly seen that coming? Who knew that the strategy from this man right here, Herm Edwards, would backfire on him in spectacular fashion? The 42-year-old quarterback, who was already nursing an Achilles injury, goes down with that same Achilles injury. Now, you've lost 2 quarterbacks in the same game. You've lost 4 quarterbacks on the season, and you did it because you tried to push the ball down the field and be aggressive with basically no time left in a 27-point game. This meant that Cliff Kingsbury, yes, that Cliff Kingsbury, finished the game, making him the 5th different quarterback that the Jets used in a game before Thanksgiving, which is always a recipe for disaster. Edwards said after the game that he did this to try and avoid being shut out, saying, "I wanted to score a touchdown. You hate to be shut out." But considering what Edwards did the previous week, considering the predicament that the Jets already had at quarterback, and considering the fact that a field goal avoids the shutout too, and makes it a 3-score game in the same way that a touchdown does, this logic doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. As Ken Berger, a writer for Newsday, said quite bluntly on the decision, Herm Edwards will be criticized for leaving Vinny Testaverde in the game, and rightfully so. It's only more evidence that seasons like this make players and coaches do strange things. And man, this has to be up there with one of the strangest, because there was no rhyme or reason, none whatsoever, for this man right here to play an already banged up 42-year-old quarterback in a 27-point game with 90 seconds left and try to push the ball down the field. It defies all logic and rational thinking, and it wouldn't shock me if this was the moment that the Jets truly realized once and for all that if they could move on from Edwards at the end of the season and get something for him, that they do it. Because no sane coach would make a decision like this. Oh, and to the shock of no one, Testaverde was inactive for the next game against the New Orleans Saints because he was injured with an Achilles injury. So really good call there by Herm to try pushing the ball down the field in that spot. Hope it was worth it, coach. Hope it was freaking worth it. Herm Edwards had a lot of good moments with the Jets. This was very clearly not one of them. As a word to the wise to any coaches watching this video, know when to wave the white flag and throw in the towel and move on. We've seen some crazy comebacks from the NFL before, and I'm usually not going to fault the coach for sitting the Hounds the entire time and for playing until the clock hits triple zeros. But there are limits to this. There are very obvious limits to this. And if you're down by 27 points with 90 seconds left, and you're playing a veteran who's nursing an injury already, and your team has already lost 3 separate quarterbacks, you should probably just not risk anything. The risk just isn't worth the reward, especially when you've still got a fair amount of the season left to play. Because on this November day in 2005, when it came to the game against the Broncos, Herm Edwards took his mantra of playing to win the game a little bit too far. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name of the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.